What's going on, guys, and welcome back to my channel. In this video I will answer the question that most of you has been asking, which is how to implement roles and permission based authorization in Spring Security 6 and Spring Boot 3. So in this video I will guide you step by step how to implement this and how things really work, and also you will have a deep understanding when to use what. So because in Spring, as you all know, we can configure almost everything in different ways, and when we talk about authorizations and permission based and role based authorization, there are multiple ways how to configure that. So I will guide you in this video step by step how to implement this, and finally I will tell you which one to use and what are the use cases and the advantages of each configuration. So if you're new to my channel, just go ahead, hit the subscribe button and join me on YouTube. Also, if you need to stay up to date and get my latest news and the posts that I'm posting almost every day, I also want to invite you to follow me on social media, on LinkedIn, also my Instagram, and I would be happy to see you part of our Facebook group and Discord server. You will have all the links down below in the description of this video. So with no further ado, let's get started. First of all, let me explain to you what are roles and permissions. So in our application, we have a user. So we have the dedicated endpoints to register and to authenticate the user. So we have, let's talk about registering a new user. And a user, we mentioned before that a user has one role. You can also change it and you can make the user or give it many or multiple roles. But let's focus on the existing first. So we said that a user has a role, and a role is on the global application level. So we say user has a role A, and then when we talk about resources or we want to go deeper in the details, then we talk about permissions. And permissions, as you can see here in this example, so we have a role A and it has many or multiple permissions, and the permission is per resource. So the permission, it will be in this way. So for example, I have one role A, and then this role A is able to read from this specific resource, write from another resource, and so on and so forth. So here I need to highlight something. Don't stick to one resource. So here we have this read permission, and we can have this read permission multiple times depending on the resource. So it 100% depends on the way you design your application and the way you want to limit or the way you want to control the permissions and the access of your backend. So here, just to give you an overview or a small example. So a role A, for example, can access administration resource or the administration endpoint, and he can read. He can also access, for example, management resources, and he can also perform a read request on there, and the same for the write, delete, update, and any other type of actions that you want. So what we will be implementing first, here we have already the role, because when we create a user, we assign a role to it. Now we need to create permissions, or we need to define permissions to our application. Now let's create some endpoints or some resources. So here in this demo package where we have the demo controller right here, so I'm just gonna copy these annotations. I will create two controllers or two new resources. So I'm gonna create a new Java class and I will call it admin controller. And I will create another class, I will call it management controller. So this one, it will have REST controller. So let me make it full screen. So we have REST controller and we have request mapping. And this one, let me call it, for example, admin. And then I don't have a service, so I don't need to inject anything, because I just want to demonstrate how permissions and roles works. So here I will just create some endpoints. So we'll have a get mapping, and then public string get. I will just call it like that to make it simple, and I will simply return some string. So here, let's say get admin controller, for example, or admin resource, and I will duplicate this one to create others. So here we have a post, and this one, it will be post mapping. And I will just name this one post. Then I will have a put mapping. The same here, I will just name the method put, and here also put, just to have the correct output when we try to invoke the different endpoints. And finally, I will add delete mapping, and this one will be my delete operation. So this is the first admin controller, and then I want to create a new controller which is for management. For example, in our application, we will have a management role and admin role, for example, and we can also consider this demo controller is for user, for example. So I will just copy paste this admin controller and name it management. And let me make it for the screen, and this one I will make it management, and then I will just replace this admin with management. So I'm going to use a shortcut, you can see it down here, and I will call it management controller. So now we have two controllers. This one should be accessible only by manager and admins, and the admin controller is going to be accessible only by the admin itself. So here, management, we will have management and admin, or manager and admin, both of them, they can access this endpoint. And for the admin controller, it will be only the admin who can access these resources or these endpoints. So now let's move on. Since we spoke about roles, so let's go to this role enum right here, and I have a user admin, and I will just create a manager role. So this is gonna be the new role I will assign to my different users. And now we said that each role can have multiple permissions. So in this case, let's create first a new enum. So a new class, and then select enum, and I will call it permissions or permission. So in this permission enum, I will have set of permissions as we saw in the diagram in the beginning. So this enum will hold the different permissions for the different resources. So first of all, let me create private final string permission. So this is going to be the permission name, and of course I will need the required args constructor, because I don't want to create my own constructor. And here I will just add the getter. Now I'm going to create, for example, I have admin read, and then this admin read, it will contain the permission to read a resource for an admin role. So for example, I can call it admin:read, or you can name it anything you want, because this one, it depends on you and the way you want to design this. So then I will have also admin update. So it's going to be admin:update. Then I will have another one, admin create, for example, and here it will be admin:create. So this one, it will be for the post, this one is for the put mappings, and this one is for the get, and I will create admin delete. So as I mentioned before, you can create as many permissions as you want. So for example, if you have, for example, a different read, so on a different resource, you can just name it read something on this resource. So it's really up to you how you want to design or how you want to create your permissions. So this one, it will be admin delete, and I will just duplicate this one for the manager. So I will add a colon here, and I will just use the shortcuts, and this one I will call it manager, and then I will change this one to manager or management. Okay, so we spoke about resources, let's stick to that. So the manager read has access or has the permission to read the resource called management. All right, so now we have the set of our permissions. Now let's go back and link these permissions to the roles. So here we said that we have a user, admin, and a manager. And now I will create and I will do the same thing as the permissions, since the permission has a string, which is the permission name. And now the role has a set of permissions. So I will create a private final set of type permission. So permission, just make sure that you import it from the correct place, which is com.alibou.security.user, and I will call it permissions. And why I'm using a set right here, because I don't want to have duplications on the permissions. So for example, if I have admin read or admin update 2 times, it will accept only 1. So now I need, of course, the required args constructor here, and then I will add the getter. So I'm using Lombok to avoid the boilerplate code. And now we need to assign some roles. So for example, for the user, let's say that the user has no permissions. And to do that, it will be collections.empty set. So we can use this one. And then for the admin, let me define some permissions for the admin. So the admin will have the following permissions, for example. So it will be set.off. And now I can define the different permissions for the admin. So it will be admin read. So now let me import this one static, and I will click on add static import. And then it will be the next one, or the next permission, admin update, and then admin delete, and of course admin create. So now I have the set of permissions for the admin, and as we mentioned before, we want the admin to be able to read from the admin resource and also from the management resource. So we'll just rename this one to management or manager. And again, I need to import each of them. So here, whether you can call it manager or management, because this is the permission for the manager to read, and it will be again management read, or you can just call it management. So it's really up to you. Now I will just copy this one and assign these roles to the manager, and I will just remove the admin, because the manager, as we mentioned, the manager should be only able to read the management resource. Now, after creating and assigning permissions to each of our roles, you can also, by the way, create multiple roles and assign multiple permissions as you want. So now after the permissions, I will create a method. I will call it public, and this one should return a list of simple granted authorities. So this object, simple granted authorities, is the one used by Spring. And just I want to remind you from the previous video, as we can see right here, when we in the user object, when we get authorities, which is coming from the user details. So this one, we are returning a list of new simple granted authorities. So Spring understands this object. So let's go back to our role right here, and I will call it get user authorities, for example, or just get authorities. Let's call it authorities, just to make it simple. And now what I want to do is I want to do get permissions, and then I will stream over the permissions, and I will do a mapping. I want to transform one permission or each permission to a new simple granted authority. All right, and this simple granted authority takes a string role or string authority. So in Spring, roles and authorities are the same, because Spring will use this information to decide who can access what. And here it's gonna be permission dot name, and then of course collectors to list or to set. So let's make it list, and then I will assign this one to a variable, and I will call it authorities equals this one. And since we are using Java 17 already, IntelliJ is proposing that we can transform or use toList directly. Now let's first return these authorities, and before that what we need to do is to also assign the current role. So for example, when we get the admin.authorities, we will return this one, and also we need to return the role admin. So finally I will do authorities.add and then new simple granted authority, and then it will be this dot name, because this dot name, for example, when we do role dot get authorities, this means that we are getting, for example, admin, and then when we do this dot name, it will be role. So here we are missing something, because when Spring needs to work with authorities, it has some prefix, and it's always role _ something. So when you need to work with roles, make sure that you always think about this one, whether you can remove it in the configuration or always think about role. And then I will show you later on, when we want to use these authorities and roles, we don't need to specify this one. So now, after creating this method, let's go to our user.java, and here in this method get authorities, and as I mentioned, this method is already overridden and it comes from the user details. So here, instead of returning only the role, we need to return the role.getAuthorities. And now Spring will use the list of authorities of each user. So now let's move to the configuration, and then let's open the security config, and I'm gonna make it full screen. And in here we see that we have this configuration part for our security, and we have here request matcher, and now we are authorizing everything or all the calls from this API v1 auth and anything. Now we need to secure the rest. Okay, so here we have this one permit all, and then let's first secure the management. Okay, so here I will add a new request matcher, and then for this request matcher I want any API/v1/management/ anything ** means any sub resource or sub endpoint of this management or of this URL, and I want it to be accessible, as we mentioned before, by any user having the following roles. So having the role admin, and I can also import static admin from it's this one, and then we need .name. And then, so since it has any role, so this any role, it accepts already a list of string or an array of strings. So here it will be also manager.name. So first I secured this endpoint to be only accessible by admin and manager. Now I can go a bit deeper, and now I will start assigning permissions. So here I will have again request matchers. And now I want to secure them one by one. So we said that for HTTP method.get on the following endpoint, so /API/management/ ***. So I'm just gonna copy this one, and this one should be accessible by people or users has any authority. Now we are using authority to secure the different endpoints. So let me import this one static. And then for the authorities, I want to have, or I want to secure the get of the management endpoint to be only accessible by admin and management write. Okay, so this one is going to be admin.write. Sorry, it should be read. And then I can import it .name. And then it's also accessible by manager read .name. So here this endpoint is only accessible by people or users having the following authority or permission, which is admin read and manager read. So I'm just gonna duplicate this one. So the next one, it will be post, and then put, and then delete, for example. So this is what we did. And here for the post, it should be admin write. We called it admin create. So let's use create. And also this one should be manager create. And then the next one for the put, it should be admin update and also manager update. So the next one, or the final one, it's admin delete and also management delete. All right, so now we secured this one. So let me just separate them to be clear. So here first, just to remind you, first we secured the management endpoint, or like the whole management endpoint that should be only accessible by admin and manager. And now I'm securing the different operations. So the get, it's only by admin and manager, and post the same, and so on and so forth. So I will just duplicate this one. So here, instead of management, I will just rename it admin. And then all I need to do is, instead of has authority, I will make it, instead of has any authority, I will make it has authority, and I will remove the manager. So this endpoint, the admin endpoint, the different methods and resources are accessible only by admin. Also, I will duplicate this one. And here, instead of management, I will say admin. And this one has role, not any role, but the user should have the admin role in order to access this endpoint. All right, so now we just secured the different endpoints, and later on I will show you also how we can use, or which annotations we can use in order to do exactly the same thing. And after securing our different endpoints, let's now insert some users. So first of all, I need to go to this authentication service right here, where we have the register method, and we see here that we are automatically assigning a user role to any user that will be registered. And I just want to make it dynamic in order to be able to create different roles. So here I will go to this register request, and after password, I will create a private role. So here this means that now we will be able to create roles by dynamically, but this one, or like this field that I'm adding right here, you need to think about the way you want to manage roles in your application. And here I just added this role just for the sake of this demo project. So here, instead of the role, I will say request.getRole. And now I have the roles that will be injected or assigned dynamically. Now let's go and insert some users. So first, let's go down to our security application, or the main class, where we have the springboot application. So in this case, I will add a new bean, and it will be public command line runner. And with this command line runner, let's call it command line runner, I will be able to inject any bean of my application. So I will inject a register service, or I think we call it authentication service. Yeah, so let's call it service. And then I will just need to return a lambda. And now in this case, what I want to do, I want at the application startup, I want to insert some users. So first I will create an admin equals registration request dot builder, and then build. And this for registration request, let's have first name, and I will say admin, for example. And then last name, and I will also call it admin. And then we will have an email. So the email, let's call it admin@mail.com. And then finally we'll have, well, not finally, but we will have a password. Let's call it password. And finally, we will have a role. And now we can say admin. Okay, so I also can import this one statically. And then what I want to do is I want to print out the token that will be generated for this admin. So here it will be just admin token. And then it will be my service dot register, and I have the admin, and then get access token. So here it will just print at the application startup. It will print the token for the admin. I will just duplicate this one 2 other times, or like just let's say 1 time. And here it will be manager. So I will just rename this one. And I will call it manager. So here for the email, I will call it manager, and also for the role, I will give it a manager role. So now when I start my application, I will have 2 users with 2 different roles. And then I will show you how this is gonna be and how it will behave when we use the token for the admin or when we use the token for the manager. So now let's start our application in debug mode, and let's do a first test. So here the application is starting, and we see that we have an admin token, and I just didn't rename that one. So let me first do it, and this one is manager token. We can restart it later on. And now I will use, for example, this admin token, and I will go to Postman. And here I have already the call. So it's going to be a post, for example, and for the admin endpoint. Here I will paste the token and click on send. So we see that we have a 4.3, which is not the expected behavior. Let's go back and check what happened. So here first we see that we have an exception, and this one it says that unsupported operation exception, and here we have an abstract immutable collection. And I think I know where this comes from is when we go to the role, and here we just changed this to list, but let's use collect and then collectors to list. And now okay, so here I see another issue, because here when we use permission.name, it will return the permission in this format. So it will be manager underscore read, which will not also be working. So let me restart and show you what's gonna happen. And here I will just open my application config, and I will add a breakpoint to the user details service right here, this method find by email. And I will add a breakpoint, and here I want the breakpoint to be on the Lambda expression level. Let me make it full screen, and now I will also reuse again the same token for the admin, and I will send again the request. So I will just replace the token, hit send. And now let me show you what we have right here. So we have this call, or we will be performing this call to the database. Let me evaluate this expression. And by the way, learning debugging is really important and really helps you to debug and check if you have any issues. And I will create really soon a video for that. And also, if you are interested in learning how to debug on IntelliJ, just drop a comment and I will create a video for that. So now let's click on evaluate expression, and here I will just do get and then get authorities. Or let's first start with a get. Here we see that this is a lazy load exception, so we can just skip it for now. And here we have this first name, last name, password, and so on and so forth. And now we can do get authorities. And let's see the authority, what is returning. So it's returning manager delete, manager update, and so on and so forth, which is not the case. So this is not what we want, because as I mentioned before, here we just made a small mistake. So instead of name, we need get permission. So here, if I continue and I go back to Postman, we see that we still have, or we have this 200. Okay, but to make this really working fine, instead of using name, let's use get permission. All right, let's restart the application for a final time, hopefully. And I will use this admin token again. And now I will try to access this admin endpoint. So I will just remove this breakpoint and go back to Postman. So here we have a post admin controller. If I try get, the admin also is able to access the get resource from the admin controller. Now let's try management. And if I click on send, we see that we have get manager or management controller. Now let's use the other token for the manager. So from the console right here, I will just copy the manager token and go back to Postman, and I will replace it. So here we should get 200 OK when we try to access the management controller using a manager token. But if I try to access the admin, I should get a 403. So this is what we are getting. So we have a 403 forbidden because the manager is not able to access the admin endpoint or the admin resources. So this is what we already defined in here. So when I go back to the security configuration, here we said that for the management has any authority, admin read, write, and so on and so forth. And then for the admin, we stick only to one role, which is the admin role, and only the authority that belong to the admin. So admin read, create, update, and delete. So as we saw right here, when we try to access the admin endpoint using a manager token, we get 403. So if I try to go back to management and send again, so here I get a 200, and also I get the response from my backend. So now we saw how we can implement authorizations and role-based and permission-based authorization in Spring Boot. Let me show you how we can improve this, or how we can use annotations to secure also the endpoint. So follow me on that. So now I will first comment this out, and I can just go to code and then comment with line or with block comments. So now I no longer have the security, or I'm no longer securing the different endpoints for the admin. So now what I can do, or what I need to do, is to do the same thing or have the same behavior, but I want to use annotations. So I will open the admin controller, and Spring already offers us the same thing, as we saw that we have, or we can use the method has authority and has role, which is this one. I'm referring to this. So here we have has authority or has role. We can also use them, but with annotations. So here, for example, we said to replicate this one with annotations. So we said that the admin controller should have, or the user should have, the role admin. All right. So now what I can do, there is an annotation called pre-authorize, and this pre-authorize, it takes a string, and the string is the method has role, the same one that we used before. And now in semicolon, we need to provide the role that we want to use for this one. So here it has role, it should be admin. So only admins, they should be able to access this endpoint. Okay, so now when it comes also, because this pre-authorized annotation, it goes on the method and the type level. Type means class and method is the method. So we can use this annotation on the class level, also on the method level. So this one, I will just paste it here. And now instead of role, I will say has authority. And here it should be admin and then colon read. So we need to use the name of the permission that we have. So here we have the permission, and now we need to use this one. So it should be admin read, admin update, not this one. Okay, so let's also continue this one, or like also let's do it here. So now it's a post mapping. So it's admin create, and then it's admin update. So be careful if you make a typo or a mistake while typing the permission name, you will have issues accessing the endpoint. So here it will be delete. Now there is one important information I need to share with you. When you want to use this pre-authorized method, you need absolutely to add an annotation. You need to enable or to tell Spring that you want to use this pre-authorized. Okay, and now let's go back to our security configuration, and on the class level, I want to enable web or method security. Okay, so if you are used or if you implemented this already in Spring 2 point something or like any version before the Spring 3, the method used to be enable global method security, and as you can see, this annotation is deprecated, and now we need to use a different one. Okay, and here I just want to tell you the difference. Before, we have within this annotation enable global method security, we have a property right here called pre-post enabled. So the pre-post enabled by default it's false, and the pre-post enabled is or refers to this annotation. Okay, so it's the pre-authorized. So if you are working with a prior version of Spring, so any version before the Spring 3, you need to use the enable global method security, and don't forget here to say pre-authorized enabled to true, because as I mentioned, the default value of this pre-post enabled is false, so think about making it true. So let me remove this, and now let me explain to you why we only need this enable method security, because the pre-post enabled now is by default true. So this is really important, and if you are using, as I mentioned, a prior version or like a version lower than Spring 3, so think about enabling this pre-post enabled. Otherwise, you don't need it. All we need is just to have this enable method security. All right, so now let's restart our application and try to test again. So I'm also running again the application in debug mode, and I have the admin token and the manager token. So I will just take the manager token and open my Postman. So here we have management, and I will just paste the new token. I click on send. So we still that we can always access the management controller. So if I change it to admin and I try to access, so we see always that we have 403, because the manager should not be able to access the admin. Now let's try with the admin token. So I will copy this again, and I will go back to Postman, and I will paste the admin token and try to access it. So we can see that with the admin token, we are able to access any endpoint of the admin using this admin token. Now, if I also try management, and I click on send, so we see also that we can access the delete operation from the management controller with the admin token. All right, now let me give you a small comparison or a small explanation when to use what, like means, I mean like when to use annotation based or when to use this kind of configuration. Both annotation-based and configuration-based role authorization methods in Spring Security have their own advantages and use cases. So when deciding which method to use, it depends on the requirements of your application and your preferred style of implementing security. So let's first talk about using the annotation or annotation based using the pre-authorized annotation. You can also use other annotations to secure your endpoint. So let me give you some use cases or like when to use this annotation or this way of securing your endpoints. So when you want fine-grained control over individual methods and their access. Also when you want to keep the authorization rules close to the code that affect. And then when the authorization rules may change dynamically, as annotations can be easily updated without needing to configure or reconfigure the entire security setup. So also the advantages of this annotation based is it provides better readability and maintainability, as the authorization rules are placed directly on the method they protect. Also, it allows the use of Spring Expression Language, or also aka or as known as SpEL, which is Spring Expression Language, for complex authorization rules. Finally, it supports complex access control scenarios such as hierarchical roles and custom permission evaluators. And now when we talk about configuration-based authorizations using the request matchers, so we use it when you want to centralize your security configuration in single place, also when you have a clear and straightforward mapping between URLs and roles, and also when you want to enforce global security rules that apply to all endpoints in your application. So for example, if you want to secure all the GET methods in your entire application, it's really easier using the request matchers configuration. And the advantages of this type of configuration, it provides a clear overview of the entire security configuration. So at a glance, you can see the whole configuration of your application and the way you are securing endpoints. Also, it allows for easy management of security rules as they are in one place. And finally, it offers a simple way to apply security rules to specific URL patterns. So in summary, the choice between annotation-based and configuration-based role-based authorization depends really on your specific requirements and preferences. So the annotation-based authorization offers fine-grained control and better readability, while the configuration-based authorization centralizes security rules and is easier to manage. It's not uncommon to use a combination of both of them, or applying global rules through configurations and more specific rules through annotations. So I hope now you know and you better understand the difference, or like this small comparison between annotation-based authorization or configuration-based authorization. And I hope you have a better clearance and a better understanding how to implement roles and permissions. So that was it for this video. I hope you really enjoyed, and now you have a better understanding how to implement roles and permission-based authorization in Spring Boot 6 and Spring Boot 3. Also, if you need anything, or if you want to see new topics and new tutorials, just go ahead, comment down in this video, and I will try to answer everyone, and also I will try to create videos as you request. Also, if you're new here and if this is the first time you see the Alibou YouTube channel, just don't forget to go and subscribe, and also join me on social media. It was really nice having you all today. See you in next video.